Welcome everyone who's on the internet. We are gathered together today. There's several of us here at GT Bray. We're having our meetings together out in public lately, and we're going to try to continue to do that. The weather will dictate what time we're having it. This week we're having it at 5 Sunday afternoon, and the weather is really nice. I mean, it's comfortable. If you can't really see on this, but we're in a pavilion and it's surrounded by oak trees, giving it lots of shade, and it looks like we're in a forest over here. It's great. I really like it, but we'll be going all kinds of different places as we go along. But today, I have been, and my family, at least Stephanie and Rachel, have been off on vacation in Missouri. And y'all have been here to fight Antifa by yourselves, and I apologize for that. Um, and it's funny how the media still says this is Black Lives Matter, but everyone, when they talk to each other, says Antifa. I hear that all the time. Why? Because we know who it really is. Not to downplay the role of Black Lives Matter. They are a socialist organization also. I was watching a video this afternoon, and it had nothing to do with what I'm talking about tonight, but it was about a meeting of socialist organizations, and they had video, and they were showing them, and lo and behold, who was there? Black Lives Matter in a big socialist agenda meeting, you know. And so don't fool yourselves into saying they're only concerned about their one concern. They want to change America to a socialist country, and they see an opportunity, and they've taken it. They're trying to destabilize the United States. They're trying to weaken us to the point where we capitulate to their every demand. And unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of capitulation lately. Is the basis for their protest legitimate? Yeah, that was a murder. It was a clear murder that they videotaped. It was clear that was murder. We have one of us here is going to go to the police academy soon, hopefully. If they teach you to put your knee on somebody's throat to hold them down, don't listen. They sure didn't teach me that in the police academy. As a matter of fact, they taught me the very opposite. Keep yourself away from their throat as much as you possibly can. They never taught any choke outs or anything like that. They just said that is forbidden territory. And every cop that I know knows that. And yet that guy sat there with his knee on the throat. And while I don't believe that cop intended to kill him, he did kill him by his own negligence, and that makes it murder 3. And I guess they found some more connections between him and the guy, popping it up to murder 2, which makes it's interesting. But it's still, what does that have to do with a store owner in Tampa and their store being looted? Nothing. Nothing at all. And therefore, they are wrong in doing that. If they want to hold a protest, man, I'm with them. If they walk by here holding up their signs, yay for them. It's America. The First Amendment gives us that right, and I'm glad they take it. Be sure I'm on your side if you're protesting, even if I disagree with what you say. Although I don't in this situation. I think they're right to protest that killing, but don't start looting. Don't start bashing things in. No. There's no excuse for that. All right. That being said, I've been out of the loop for 2 weeks. Has anyone seen anything eyewitness anything? I think you said you saw windows bashed out and Braden did.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Country of Chad.
Was there
I love that. It's good.
Yeah, and there's a new independent country in the United States now, the country of Chad. More power to them. Listen, this to me, as you watch what's going on, you see the strict delineation going on in America. And the big cities are all run by people who want one world government. Anyone tell me, raise your hand if you know the answer, why are they calling for the defunding of police? Is it that they just don't like police?
So the UN can step in with their security force.
The UN, okay, that's
That's what
and that's one possible answer, and I agree. That's possible. I think it's a little simpler in that socialist countries, you take every socialist country I can think of, and I'm talking about true socialism, they will tout some other countries that aren't truly socialist. But socialist countries like Nazi Germany, oh yeah, I've got into an online debate with somebody about that once. Nazi Germany was not socialist. I said, look up what Nazi stands for. Goodness gracious, are you that dumb? I mean, it means National Socialist. It's an abbreviation of German for no National Socialist, Nazi. They were indeed socialist in nature. Now they were more socialist along the line of maybe Sweden, actually, in that the government controlled a lot of the industry but didn't own it directly necessarily. And then there's Soviet Union. Now they owned everything. They owned the means of production. It was funny, late in the Soviet Union, they actually allowed the people to own a small portion of the production in that country. And you know what happened? That small portion produced a lot, over 50% of the goods of the country. And farmland, I think the farmers got at the end, towards the end of the Soviet Union, got to control 10% of the land, and they got to do what they wanted to with their 10%. And that 10% produced over 50% of the crops. It's an amazing and that just shows you the failure of socialism. But you go to Cuba, you go to all that. What are they? Have you ever heard of the Moscow police under the Soviet Union? You never heard of that. Why? It was the KGB, a national police force, is what they had, and that's because it's hard to control, or it's hard to control local police. And we learned something in COVID-19, right? Not all police will go along with the big government demands. Some cops just say no. One town we went to, I won't mention it. I don't want the big government cops going down to that town. We were in Missouri. Man, they didn't give a hoot about COVID-19. We went to an all-you-can-eat buffet and pigged out, and everyone was sitting as close as they wanted to everyone else. There wasn't a mask in the whole I never saw a mask in that whole county. Why? Because the local government said, we're not doing this. We're not playing that game. And they've learned. You can mandate all you want, but some local people won't go along with the program. And the sheriffs, especially all over the United States, the sheriffs are the perfect defender of freedom in America, and the sheriff is an important role because of that. For instance, I'll give you an example. I think, I can't remember what city off the top of my head, but I read the headlines. There was one city that the chief of police said, I'm glad that people own their own guns and they need to defend their homes from the looting. And he was fired the next day by the city council. You can't do that with the sheriff. He has to be removed through election. There is ways to do it, but it is really tough to remove a sheriff. Look at Sheriff Israel. If there ever was a sheriff needed to be removed, it took months and months and months before they finally got the legal things together to remove Sheriff Israel. And even then, he could run for sheriff again if he wanted to. I don't think even down there in that liberal area they would probably elect him again, but he could. So a big national police force, or even an international one, it's heading towards that international one, but the intermediary step is a national police force. The point is, and where we're headed today, I know I'm going to connect this to Joseph somehow. You wait and see. You're going to be amazed at my miraculous connection here. There are biblical things we got to understand now. Number one, I know I trudge this verse out all the time, but it needs to be, especially today. We are at the end of the end times. There is no way that all of us here live our natural lives without Jesus coming again if the Bible's true. The Bible talks about Jerusalem or Israel regaining its statehood, and that nation or that generation would not pass away before the return of the Lord. And we can go into all the all the verses. I'm not going to get into that right now. But that means that generation. How long does a generation live? Maybe 120 years. I've been hearing of a few hundred plus people recovering from COVID, and I'm like, you go, that's great. So maybe 120 years, maybe. So if somebody was born in May of 1948, 120 years from now, it'd be 2068. Maybe. So somewhere between now and then, Jesus is going to return. But in the meantime, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. The battle going on is not just physical. It isn't Antifa and them alone. Matter of fact, they're just a bunch of dingbats that do the bidding of those who pay them. Yeah, they're being paid. They're being given transport to their places. A friend of ours put on Facebook, I guess, a little thing about a neighboring town that Stephanie and I used to go to all the time when we lived in Idaho. And that town had heard that Antifa was coming. And so, the clip said 200 people showed up with their AR-15s and such to greet them, and that they never showed up. But I did some research, and they did show up, but nothing happened. Why? Because they were outnumbered about 4-1 by armed people, and nothing happened whatsoever. But those people, the Antifa people, they're just the things we see. That's not where the real battle is. Most of those Antifa people that are going to those rallies, they're not they're the ones they're the expendable ones. How many of you know history well enough to know who the brown shirts are for Nazi Germany? Anyone know the brown shirts?
Sounds familiar.
You were? Okay. Yeah, the brown shirts. The brown shirts were the thugs of Nazi Germany. That's Antifa. I know they say they're anti-fascist, but I got news for you. They support fascism. They are the fascists. The brown shirts were Antifa. They were the thugs. They were the ones that did the bidding of their commanders. Anyone know what happened to the brown shirts? Once the Nazis got the power they demanded, they rounded them up and killed most of them. Night of the Long Knives. Along with a bunch of enemies of the Nazis died during that purge. Anyway, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. This is not talking about Nancy Pelosi. I know that sounds like her, but spiritual wickedness in high places. She is wicked, and she's spiritually wicked. But she just like the minions in Antifa, she's doing the bidding of her commander too, which would be spiritual entities. She is answering to spiritual. I don't for 1 second believe that Nancy Pelosi is not in constant contact with the spirit world. She is as wicked a person as I think she's probably demon possessed and certainly demon controlled. But what do we do about that with that knowledge? I mean, how do we use it in our lives? Well, we need to know that this is coming. I've actually been warning this group from practically day one of the first service of our church. You guys remember early on? What was I saying? Bad times are coming. Bad times are coming. The United States, with my reading of Scripture, is not found in the very end times. I think they've gone off the scene. But how do you handle that situation? Well, Proverbs 27:12 says. Anyone tell me what Proverbs 27:12 says without looking it up? A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. And not only does it say it in Proverbs 27, I think it's in Proverbs 22:3. It says something very similar. No, it's not very similar. It's word for word identical. It repeats the verse again. Proverbs uses that verse twice. Why? Because it's true, absolutely true. And when we get to the part about Joseph, if we get to the part about Joseph, think I'll make it? He's not so sure. All right. When we get to the part about Joseph, you'll see what doubling something means in God's world. And it ought to make you think. How many of you a month ago were thinking, I can't wait till COVID-19 is over and we get back to normal? And then what? Bam! Another thing pops up that's got people shut up about COVID-19. How many of you know the worst day of new cases of COVID-19 in the state of Florida during this whole epidemic was yesterday? Yesterday. The worst day of new cases. Now, that's because we're testing like mad now. We got tests out there. I'm not worried about it. I don't think it's spreading worse than ever, but, why didn't you know that? Because the news isn't talking about COVID-19. Remember when the protesters in Michigan and Tallahassee and all over the United States, California, were protesting against the lockdowns?
Yeah.
And remember the newscasters almost crying at how they're spreading COVID-19. Yet the same newscasters are watching thousands gathered together at much closer distances, much greater numbers, and they're cheering it on. Go, guys.
They're essential
protesters.
Hmm?
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. All right. Awesome. All right. So, also, I'm sorry. There's just things in the last 2 weeks I've read and seen, and I got to tell you, there's biblical answers to almost everything you hear on the internet. A biblical answer. There was a thing. A friend of ours posted that we'd known. We haven't seen her in years, but she posted something on, and it was one of those repost things. It wasn't her original material, but it was something inside this post. It said something like, "We as white people don't know like what it is to be a black man, and to wake up every morning knowing you're hunted for your color of your skin." Or I mean, like, what? What are you talking about? And I know I have a lot of black friends who would say the same thing. Are you out of your mind? That's nuts. No way. That. There are some, but you know where you find them? Gather with each other because they're guilty of something. The criminal element, no matter what color of your skin, is always looking over their shoulders. You ever heard of people that got by with a crime? And they were finally caught like 50 years later. They finally tracked them down. You ever notice in most of those cases, they lived a life of their own imprisonment because they were so scared of being caught, they were looking over their shoulder the whole time. And the Bible has an answer to that. The wicked flee when no man pursueth. They think somebody's after them all the time. Anyone that says, I'm out, I'm being hunted, they're either out of their mind paranoid, or they're so wicked they think they are because they know they deserve to be. But the righteous are as bold as a lion. And I looked up this verse. I always tell you what about individual verses in the Bible. Look at the context, right? But the problem with Proverbs is sometimes the context is meaningless because it's just a wise saying. A proverb is a wise saying. And once the wise saying is complete, it's going on to a completely different subject. But I was amazed at the next verse. After the wicked flee when no man pursueth. The next verse says, "For the transgressions of a land, many are the princes thereof, but by a man of understanding and knowledge, the state thereof shall be prolonged." By the transgression of the land, many are the princes thereof. What did the prince do in the kingdom? Well, unlike Walt Disney princes, they don't sit around and fawn over themselves and do, a prince in this case, in a biblical sense. Well, look at Daniel was described as a prince. Was he the son of a king? No. He was a leader of the land. And it says, "But for the transgression of the land, many are the princes thereof." And that's what's become of America. I remember the day when I didn't know anyone that worked for the government. Why? Because we didn't need that many people to run the government. It just wasn't necessary. Not a big deal. Now, man, we have people all over the place. Hey, don't mow your lawn? Somebody's going to be there. They're going to tell you all about it. Truck's not running right. It's, get a little smoky out there, man. Some EPA agent's going to be around. They're gonna really get at you. There's huh? Yeah. No, I know what you're. But there, because, and frankly, to a degree, that's right. Because now we're paying taxes for things we didn't used to have to pay taxes for. Hey, when I remember my grandma showing me her last driver's license before she passed away. Her last driver's license had expired like 20 years before time. It was just a piece of paper with her name written on it and her address, and that was about it. It's a piece of paper. But because today we have so many wicked people in our country, what do they got to do when you get your driver's license? Oh, we gotta know who you are, because there's so many people faking who they are. So many people want to kill us, trying to sneak into the United States, and we can't give them driver's licenses. Okay, Cameron, I made it.
Yeah.
Genesis 41. I am going to be skipping a few verses here and there, but go back to Genesis 41 and read them, fill them in. Make sure I am not taking things out of context. First verse, and it came to pass at the end of 2 full years. 2 full years from what? From Joseph being told by the Pharaoh's butler, "I'll tell Pharaoh about you." And then he went back and he didn't do it. 2 years passed. Can you imagine Joseph? When the guy says, "I'll tell Pharaoh about you," Joseph's like, getting out of jail. Yes. A month goes by. 6 months. A year. 2 years. Yikes, what's going on, Lord? But Joseph still trusted the Lord. Anyway, the Pharaoh dreamed a dream, and behold, he stood by the river. Behold, there came out of the river 7 well-favored kine, that means cows, fat-fleshed, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other cows came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other cows upon the brink of the river. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed cows did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat cows. So Pharaoh awoke. Okay, so Pharaoh had a dream, a weird dream, a zombie dream, right? Zombie cows.
Sounds about right.
Okay, they weren't called zombie cows. But here you had these big fat cows, and they were looking good, What do you want what do they sell cattle by? Weight, right? So when your cows go to market, you want them to be having good weight on them, because that's what you're going to be. You're going to be eating the meat, and you want that, a good-looking cow. And along comes some sick, nasty, evil-looking cows, and they ate the fat ones. Oh, by the way, they didn't get fatter after eating the fat ones. That doesn't say that. It says it later, but they didn't get fatter. That was a weird dream. You ever have weird dreams? Yeah, I remember dreaming weird dreams as a kid, but anyway, I still dream sometimes weird dreams. All right. And then, verse 5, and he slept and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk Rank and good. Rank in this case means nice, doesn't mean disgusting like it means today. And behold, 7 thin ears blasted with the east wind sprung after them, and the 7 thin ears devoured the seven rank and full ears. And the Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Once again, I guess zombie corn now? I don't know. Anyway,
Zombies, vegetables.
number one, 7 ears on a stalk of corn is a pretty good harvest. You'd be hard pressed to find, if we went through a cornfield today, you'd be hard pressed to find 7 ears on a stalk of corn. That's a lot of corn, and full ears to boot. And then the next stalk of corn had 7 ears, and they were scrawny, had no corn on them, and they ate the good ears. Anyway, in the morning his spirit was troubled. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called all the magicians of Egypt, and all the wise men thereof, and Joseph told him his dream, but there was none that could interpret it unto Pharaoh. Then spake, 2 years later, the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. All right, so then, and we're going to skip where the butler describes how he knows Joseph and why he's asking the Pharaoh to listen. And we're going to go down to verse 15. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there's none that can interpret it. And I have heard said of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered the Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of a river. And then in verse 25, the next verses, Pharaoh describes the dream. We're not going to go over the dream again. Verse 25, Joseph gives the interpretation. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. God hath shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. See? Those dreams are connected. They're related. The 7 thin and well-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. And behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And there shall rise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt. And the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. Now listen to this next verse. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, it is because this thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. When I read this verse today, I've heard this verse all my life. I heard this story probably first when I was a kid in Sunday school or something. Or some sort of Bible program as a kid. And so I've heard this verse all my life, but it never struck me. When God doubles something, it means something intently. When Jesus said, truly listen to me, is that what he said? He said, verily, verily, it means truly. But he didn't just say it once, he said it twice. Why? It's important. It's important. You gotta listen to it. And why do you think it struck me about Pharaoh's dream being doubled? Yeah, COVID-19 made me realize this country is that close to anarchy. It is. It's that close to tyranny. We watched governors, mayors, councilmen, county commissioners all over the United States suddenly become tyrants, didn't we? We watched them become tyrants. And we thought, boy, I hope this gets over soon so their tyranny can end. And then you watch the same places that were tyrants in COVID-19 are the ones cheering on the destruction going on with Antifa right now. Yeah, they're the ones ordering the police. Let them have the police buildings. Let them destroy them. Don't protect them. I'm telling you, cops are angry. They don't want anything to do with this nonsense. They want to be able to do their jobs, and they're being ordered by tyrants to not enforce the law. That's evil, folks. That's evil. So first, the tyrants made everyone angry by their tyranny over COVID-19, and then the same tyrants are allowing the destruction of their own cities, counties, and states with their own a new form of tyranny, lack of enforcement of the law. Lack of enforcement. We could go into Proverbs and find verse after verse after verse about wicked rulers who are like this. But suffice it to be said, the fact that those two are appearing boom, boom, one after another, should give us a pause as we read that verse. The dream was doubled. It is because this thing is established by God. I believe with all my heart, and I'm not a prophet, I don't know. This is just my feelings on it. I believe with all my heart, God is warning Christians in America of the dangers we're about to face. And he's warning us to be prepared and get ready. We don't know. So many people, I don't know if you realize it, but early in the COVID thing, I think March was the biggest gun sales month ever recorded. And as soon as the rioting started, the gun supply had gone back up. May beat March. May is now the biggest gun sales record. I believe that right now, as of middle of June, we're probably in the top 10 of all years of gun sales ever in America. And people believe somehow that that's all they need. A gun and some bullets will protect me. Will a gun and bullets protect you? Yeah, to a degree. But that's not all there is to it. That's not all there is to it. All right, let me go on, and I'll show you what I think there is to it. Verse 33, now therefore let Pharaoh look out for a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and make a fifth part of the land of Egypt and take up to the fifth part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. And let them gather all the food of these good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. That the food shall be stored in the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. And this thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Now that's the end of the Bible reading, but I do have thoughts on that. We should be ready. We should be ready for what's to come. This is a tough time we have facing us. Will it happen right away? I don't think so. My gut tells me we have time. God usually sends his warning with a time to do something about it. But I don't know that. I think it was around 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, when Trump got elected, I said his presidency may be a gap between the wickedness of 2 presidents. And that gap may be for us to prepare for what's to come. The problem with Christians in America is we've watched too many movies. You say, Brother Paul, what do you mean we've watched too many movies? How many have watched any Rapture movies? Left Behind, Thief in the Night, Distant Thunder, blah, 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 all those. I bet you there's probably 100 of them out there by now. There's a common theme to those movies? Everything's going along great. Everything's doing good. Everything's great. People are not hungry. There's nothing wrong. There's no persecution of the saints. Everything's going good, and boom, rapture happens and everything falls apart. Do you think they could set up a world government that quickly? No. I don't think so. Everything we're seeing today is building towards a world government. We had one answer when I asked why are they talking about defunding the police that was looking at the world government. I wasn't even looking that far. I think you may, the long-term answer is yours. The short-term answer is national, and then it'll go to international. You're absolutely right. Spot on. That's what they're building, that framework for the future. And what does the future bring? Well, the future brings the tribulation, but I'm talking about the beginning of sorrows, the pre-tribulation time period. Now, I've heard pastors say, Matthew 24, when Jesus says the beginning of sorrows, he's talking about the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. I would beg to disagree with that. I don't think so. I think he's talking about pre-tribulation period. Most people like the notion that he's talking about the early tribulation period for one reason. We get out scot-free, right? The whole world suffers for being a Christian. In the United States, we cruise along in Cadillacs and say, oh my, God is good to us. But he's good to the people in Africa being persecuted by Muslims today. He is good to them. Might they be beheaded tomorrow? They might. But God loves them too. Christians in America are fat, lazy. If any group matches the Laodicean church, it's American Christians. And I don't care what ilk you are of American Christians. You are fat, lazy, and blind, naked, and poor is how the Laodiceans were described. And that is not how the world sees American Christianity. They see us as rich. Why? Look at our buildings. I mean, look at this magnificent... Okay, this isn't our building. And if it was, that would be a mighty poor church building in this area. But buildings aren't churches, are they? Buildings are a gathering place. We got all kinds of activity over here. The important thing is our churches are building edifices to themselves. I know I have a lady I know and I've known for years, all my life. All the time I'm hearing, our church is building blah, blah, blah. We just spent $1 million on this, so we could do this. So this group could have their own special room, or this group could have their thing. And I'm like, oh my, God is in heaven weeping. That church's denomination is returning missionaries from the mission field because they cannot fund them anymore. And they're building a building so this group could have their own room. And that group can have something special. And the youth can have their own magnificent little edifice to themselves. And I've seen churches with skateboard parks and you name it. I used to go to a church with a roller rink in it. I mean, you know who I'm talking about. Yeah, that's nuts. That's nuts. Spending God's money on roller skates. Are you out of your minds? But there's no spiritual basis, no biblical basis for anything like that. But the Laodiceans would have fit right in. Ooh, you're rich like we are. No, they're poor. They're one of the poorest churches I know. There are many, many poor churches, and they're usually in giant buildings. Why do I say they're poor? Because they're spiritual destitute. They don't know what it is to walk day by day in the Lord's grace and feeling moving the Spirit in the little things in life. There's a lot more I could say. I could go on and on about this whole situation and its wackiness and everything about it, but suffice it to say, we'll go on Thursday night. We'll have a little bit more of this. It'll be more geared towards this Thursday night.
I have more to talk about.
Yeah, unfortunately, I believe you're right.
Yeah.
We'll probably have more to talk about. Hopefully, it'll be from afar, not up close and personal. But get prepared. It's going to get up close and personal. All right. For those of you on the internet land, we're closing here. Thanks for joining us.